All right, guys, we're going to work on more rational expressions here. Today we're going to multiply and divide them. So nothing really new, just more taking what we knew in the past and messing around with what we just learned and putting it all together. So simplifying and multiplying and then simplifying and stating restrictions. Let me switch to a different color here. So when you're multiplying something like this, okay, you're going to have to state your restrictions before you start canceling out. But let's multiply here. And you can multiply straight across, if I could understand what was underneath that purple line here. So what you can do here is you can multiply and say that I have 10x to the 10y squared over 15x to the 4y to the 5, but you don't need to do that, okay? You can start crossing out across, because this really means we're multiplying. Multiplying means just kind of take it like this, and then things can cancel out like this from numerator to denominator. So, for example, there's a 10, 5 goes in twice. There's a 5, 5 goes in once. I have 10x's on top, 4 on the bottom. These disappear. I'm left with 6, and that's a 5, I think. And that's a 2, so these are gone. I'm left with 3. So when I clean that up, I have x to the 6. I put the 2 in the front, and then I have y cubed. If I multiply like this first, that's a 4, that we could cancel out. Oh, see, that's why you gotta be careful. You can cancel out and make that 2 and 3. This is gone, leaves me x to the 6. This is gone, leaves me y cubed. Okay, either way you end up with this sort of thing here. So that's simplifying. What you want to make sure is before you start canceling out, so if I go back a few steps here, you make sure that the denominator cannot equal 0. And when would 15x to the 4 or y to the 5 equal 0? Well, 15 can't be 0, so I don't have to worry about that. But if x was 0, then this is going to be 0. And if y was 0, that can't be 0. So those are restrictions or non-permissible values for my denominator. When you get into factors, you're going to be able to just simplify first before you multiply. So if I look over here, before I get to the scratching out, I want to state my restrictions. So I'm looking down here and I have x minus 3 can't be 0. X cannot be plus 3. And from here, this x times y can't be 0. So x can't be 0, because if x is 0, then xy is 0. And also y can't be 0. So a couple of restrictions there. But now we just start canceling out. I have an x minus 3 on the bottom and x minus 3 here. There's a 5. I'll get rid of that. There's a 10. So I have two 5s. I divide the 5 into both. And then I have an xy. I have an x here on the bottom. That's gone. I have two x's here, so I'm left with 1. And on the bottom now, I'm just left with y. On the top, I'm left with 3x y plus 2. Okay, and at this point, I can't further simplify. Don't do this. People like to do this all the time. Don't do that, okay? Y plus 2 is y plus 2, and that's y. And if you cancel it out, that's saying that something plus 2, so 7 plus 2, over 7 could be canceled into 2. But we know that's not true. That's 9 over 7. That's a completely different fish. So don't try that at home, or don't try that anywhere. What you're going to have to do is factor, if you can imagine. And when we divide, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So let's factor x squared minus x. That's x plus, let me do this right, plus 2x minus 3. And then on the bottom here, two numbers that multiply to 15 and add to 8 are 5 and 3. And that's divided by this. Now, before I flip this, this is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. But before I flip this, I want to make sure that this restriction here, x not being negative 5, is part of my restriction list. Then I'm going to flip it, because when you're dividing by a fraction, remember this, you divide by 2/3. So if I want 6 divided by 2/3, that's the same as 6 times 3/2, and that's how we divide. So you're going to multiply by this fraction, which is now x plus 5 over x plus 3. And before I start crossing things out, canceling things out, I go through to make sure I have all the restrictions. So x plus 5 can't be 0, so x is not minus 5. I already have that, and I don't have to write that again. And these two are the same also, so all I'm going to add is minus 3. That's my restrictions. Then I cancel out. I should have done that. So what have I done here? Sorry, guys. Sorry. Let's go back a step. This is not plus 3. I'm sure you found that. This is minus 3. So when I flip this, this is x plus 5, x minus 3. So that's going to give me a new restriction. So here, my restriction was minus 3 before, and now it's also plus 3. So minus 3 from here, plus 3 from here. So now when I cross out, there's an x minus 3, there's an x minus 3, they're gone. X plus 5, is there an x plus 5 on the bottom? Sure. Down here, I'm left with an x plus 2 on top and an x plus 3 on the bottom. And that's a simplified version of this entire thing. Okay, and there are my restrictions. Just keep track of your restrictions. So nothing really different as you move on. Here you're going to have two binomials. You're going to have you're going to factor the top, you're going to factor the bottom, and then same with this. Factor before you flip. Okay, so factor, then tell me the restrictions based on everything that's on the bottom of the fractions, and then flip to cancel out. Okay, and keep adding all the restrictions and keep track of those. Okay, that's about it. The only thing you want to be careful with is anytime you see something like this, I mentioned this in the last unit too, don't do this. Okay, don't try to factor this. Rewrite it as x minus 2 plus 16, and the first thing you want to do is get that negative out of the whole thing. Okay, so you're going to common factor the negative out, and then you're going to deal with what's here. So if I have that x squared minus 16, that's the difference of squares of x plus 4 and x minus 4. So when I clean this up now, this is x plus 4, x minus 4. On the bottom, two numbers that multiply to negative 15 and are 2 apart. That's x minus 5 and x plus 3. Let's see if that's right. They multiply to negative 15 and add to negative 2. That's right. And that's multiplying by x plus 3, x minus 4. So the main part was doing this probably. So rearrange, common factor, and then deal with it. Factor after the fact. This was a difference of squares. My x non-permissible values are plus 5, minus 3. So plus 5, minus, comma, minus 3, and plus 4. And I look, can I cancel out? Sure. That cancels out with that. That cancels out with that. And I'm left with just x plus 4 over x minus 5. And the whole thing is negative. Put the negative anywhere you want. Okay, more of the same. Common factor this first. So this is something like this, and then deal with that. That's another difference of squares. Look to common factor and look to do that. The one thing, I don't know if we've done this in a while, but if you're looking for this here, when you have x's and y's on the bottom, when you want to say that x minus 2y cannot be 0, you're going to state your restrictions in terms of either x's in terms of y's or y's in terms of x's. So what I suggest is you choose which one you're going to do and then isolate for this one. So for example, I want x can't be something here in terms of y. So I have 3x minus 2y can't be 0. So that would tell me that 3x cannot be, bring this over 2y. And that would then be x cannot be 2y over 3. So when I divide by 3, I'm left with that. So that's one non-permissible value. Over here I have y minus x cannot be 0. And I want it to be x cannot be something, so I bring this x over because it's negative, and x cannot be y. So my two values, or my two restrictions are x cannot be 2/3 y, or 2y over 3, and x cannot be y. And that's about it. So more of the same sort of stuff, just keep factoring away and keep crossing things out and keep stating your restrictions. All right, take care.